All right, welcome to another episode of Tuesdays with Jakey. It is Tuesday, June 29th, 2021, the last Tuesday before the next birthday of this glorious nation, the United States of America, of which I am a lifelong citizen, and 44 of my 47 years I've been an inhabitant. Guess now would be a good time to tell you the first time I ever left the country. I was banned from ever entering that country again, or so they told me. In 8th grade, I went on a school field trip to Quebec, Canada, with my French class, and they were sold fireworks. We went on it was spring, and so it was still a little chilly. It was probably like in April. I think it was like around our April vacation, school vacation, and I was in my third year of French class, and maybe second year of French class, and we took a school trip to Quebec, Canada, and we stayed at the Chateau Frontenac, which is one of the nicest hotels in Quebec. I don't know why they thought it would be a good idea to put a bunch of 8th grade school children from America into that hotel, but times were different then, and they sure were. So we bought some fireworks while we were there, and then in the room one night, me and my buddy, it was me and two buddies. One was named Nate, and the other I forget his name, but we were playing this game with the fireworks, and we were like, the game was, let's see who can get the lighter closest to the wick without lighting the fireworks. And it was like this thing that just shot kind of flames and sparks out of it. It looked like a miniature Reese's peanut butter cup, about that size, with one of those green wicks. And I lost that game, and I lit the thing. So then I went and I put it in the toilet, but those green wicks don't get put out with water. So then, while it was still, the wick was burning, I think I put it in the toilet first. That didn't work. So then I went to open the window, but the windows of the hotel didn't open. I was going to throw it out the window. And then I just put it on the floor, and I stamped my foot on it, hoping that I could, put it out that way. And the firework ignited and just started shooting flames out from underneath both sides of my foot. And there were all these different colored flames, and, smoke filled the room. And I set the carpet on fire, of course, and I managed to, the carpet didn't catch on fire. Technically, I guess it just burned a huge hole in it, because every time a flame came up, I just started stomping it out, and there was no getting around this one. I was in a lot of trouble, and the whole fire alarm went off for the whole building. Thankfully, the sprinklers didn't go off, but they evacuated the building, and of course, I tried to pretend like I didn't know what was going on, and they quickly traced the smoke and the smell to my room. And we had one more night left on the trip. We were leaving the next day. So that night I had to stay with, there was our principal or vice principal. Bob Bennett was his name. I think he was the principal. He was on the trip with us. So I had to spend the night in his room that night, which was not pleasurable for either of us. Thankfully, he did not fuck me or even try. And yeah, he just gave me a lot of shit, of course, and I deserved it. It was well deserved. And then when we went to leave Canada, we were at the border, and I got pulled off the bus with our principal and got a stern talking to from the Canadian authorities, and they told me I was not allowed back in Canada until I was 21, unless I was with my parents. And they took my name and took my picture. I don't think they took my fingerprints. I don't recall that happening. I don't know that they really banned me from Canada, but they told me they were, and that was enough for, a 13-year-old kid to hear that. And enough, I guess, enough to convince me that I was banned, but not enough to really scare me. But yes, I started my international career of crime early with arson in the Chateau Frontenac. I have never been back to Quebec. I've been back to Montreal multiple times, Toronto a bunch of times, Canada. I love Canada. Never had a problem at the border, thank Christ. Yeah, so anyway, that wasn't on my list. I made notes today for the first time in a while. I've been doing things off the top of my head. Wow, I had an amazing weekend. I got back late last night from a a trip out to this town, Yellow Pine, that I've talked about a bunch on here. I visited a couple of weeks ago, and I really wanted to go back, so I did, and I did something that was uncharacteristic of me, and I think uncharacteristic of most people. Most Americans, certainly. Most first world nation people, certainly uncharacteristic. I left my phone at home on purpose. And that's a hard thing to do at all. I started doing that, I guess I started doing that like 10 years ago when I was going for runs. That's around the time, it was probably around 2009 or 10 that I started running without music. And that was a huge revelation to me in my life. Because this was like before an iPhone had a lot of music on it, I guess, maybe. Because I seem to remember that it was my iPod that was out of battery, but whatever it was, whatever I used to play music at that time was, the battery had died, and it was time I had like suited up and put all my clothes on to go for a run, and that's when I noticed that there wasn't any energy in what I was going to listen to music on. So I was like, you know what, I could wait for this to charge, or I could just go out. And I went out, and I ran like 3 or 4, 5 miles, however long it was at that time. It was definitely at least 3, because I remember where I went. I remember the day. I was living on 250 East Houston Street in the Red Square building, 4th floor balcony overlooking Houston. And I remember I would plug my it was my iPod Shuffle. I would plug my iPod Shuffle in the outlet right next to the sliding glass door that went to the balcony. And I remember kind of leaning down and being like, oh, it hadn't been plugged in. And I know I ran at least over to the river and the Williamsburg Bridge, which would have made it 3 miles, but very often times during that time period, I was running 6 or 7 miles a day. Anyway, I went out for that run, and I did it without music, and it was the first time in forever, maybe ever, that I ran without music. And that was a revelation. And I guess, yeah, I was using an iPod Shuffle a lot, but I was also was I using an iPhone or an iPod? I don't know. But I remember one of the things that bothered me was when I ran with music, if a song came on that I didn't want to listen to, I would skip it and look for another song. And if it was the shuffle, I would just skip it, but it would like interrupt my whole rhythm of running, because I'd reach for something and be doing something different. And so what I learned on that run was that like it's really cool to be out there without music. And so that's when I first started kind of like being disconnected with my phone for more than a couple of minutes. Like ever since smartphones came out, and especially iPhones, they're always right by you, right? Like unless you're, even if you're fucking, they're not far away. Like if you're in the shower, they're not far away. You're not using them, but you're never like away from them. So yeah, I did that a lot while I was running, but then that was the only time I would do it. If I wasn't running, I would always have my phone with me. And then when the pandemic started, obviously when I was in treatment too, I went 60 days pretty much without my phone. They would let us have it for like 45 minutes on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but a lot of those days, I would just refuse it. Like that would be your go-to phone time, and you'd only get it if you didn't fuck up, if you didn't skip group therapy meetings and stuff like that. But a lot of times they'd be like, okay, it's phone time, everybody, and everyone would rush to the OG's office. That's what they called the people who, the staff that were sort of in charge of the patients. OGs for original guests, because all of those people had been through treatment, many of them at the guest house. So anyway, they would be like, hey, you can have your phone for these 45 minutes. And a lot of times I'd be like, nah, I don't need it. And everybody'd be like, what? I was like, what am I going to do? Start texting people? Like, most people, we did have phone privileges otherwise. And I would use a phone to call my friends. But, like, I didn't want to look at text. I didn't want to look at the internet. I wasn't trying to, like, check my emails or anything. I was trying to get well, That's why I was there. A fair amount of people who end up in those places, like, they end up there as, like, a punishment. Whether it's like court ordered, which is some people, and a lot of them were like children of rich people who, for lack of a better term, that was like where they got sent when they were fucked up. They would get sent to rehab. Not were fucked up, but when they fucked up too much. Sent to rehab, sent to treatment centers. So they were just dying to get their phones whenever they could, because they were just sick of being in places like that. But anyway, moving on to the pandemic, I started going for a lot of walks, because that's all you could do. And oftentimes I would leave my phone at home during the walk just to kind of clear my head and be like, there's no reason to check emails now. I'm not working, right, during the pandemic. So I'd go out on a lot of long walks without my phone, and I found that to be very therapeutic, just being out there and in the moment. And it's like, what's the worst that could happen? Like, I would usually bring like my wallet, Metro card, $20 cash, in case I needed it. But like, I wasn't even going into stores. I wasn't really buying anything. But I just found it really nice to go on long walks, and the walks got longer and longer and longer, sometimes 2 or 3 hours, just like roaming around the city. And recently I was talking to a friend of mine in London, and she's been struggling a lot with depression, and she told me she's been going for walks, and I suggested, like, hey, why don't you leave your phone behind? And she was like, what? And I was like, yeah, I know, but trust me, just try to leave your apartment without your phone. It's like, walk for 15 minutes in one direction, turn around and walk back. And then increase it. If the more you get a comfort level of being without your phone, the more you can do that kind of thing. And I'm not sure if she tried it yet, because I haven't heard from her, which hopefully means she's been putting her phone down more. But this past weekend, I was like, you know what? On Thursday night, I was like, I'm going to go to Yellow Pine tomorrow on Friday. And I was like, I'm just going to leave my phone behind. And then I was like, that's crazy. Like, what if something happens? What if you need your phone? What if you need to get in contact with someone? I was like, who the fuck do I need to get in contact with? It's going to be 3 days. I'll be back on Sunday. Like, not even a full 3 days, more like 48 hours. It turned into like, 52, 54 hours, something like that. And then your mind starts racing. What do you need your phone for? What if my motorcycle breaks down? What if I need to take a picture? What if there's an emergency? I'm like, well, what kind of fucking emergency could there be? If my motorcycle breaks down in the middle of nowhere, like, to give some perspective, this town Yellow Pine, there's a couple ways to get there. You can take main roads for a little while, or paved roads. I wouldn't call them main roads. You take paved roads for like an hour and a half, and then the last like 26 miles is on dirt roads that are super windy through the mountain, and you lose cell service like before you even get to the paved roads if you go that way. And the other way is you go into the town of McComb and go down Lick Creek Road, which I can't say the name of that road without laughing, but you go down Lick Creek Road, and you just take that for literally 52 miles to the town of Yellow Pine, and it's a dirt road, and oh my fucking God, well, I'll get to that. It's stunning, but the entire way, like, once you get out on a Lick Creek Road, you pretty much lose signal immediately, and you don't have cell signal the whole way. So I was like, well, what good would signal do me, Like, if my motorcycle breaks down, I can't call anyone. And I know that road was going to be like moderately trafficked over the weekend. Not like, I mean, moderately is all in relation to the amount of traffic that's around here to begin with. But like, if my bike broke down, I wouldn't be stranded for more than an hour or two before someone would come along and hopefully give me a ride either into Yellow Pine or back to McCall, whichever way they were headed. And I would figure out something from there. So I just left my phone behind. It was fucking great. And it was great almost from the jump. The biggest issues were I stopped to get some toothpaste and to get gas. And both times I got off my bike, I instinctively reached for my phone, because that's what I usually do. I get off my motorcycle, reach for my phone, check to see if I have any messages, which is crazy, but I think we all do that, right? You're just programmed to constantly look and see if you have messages. So as soon as I got out of town, though, and got out on the road, I was like, this is great. And then there was one point where I came over this little hill on the dirt road, and on the left was this gorgeous fucking open green meadow with a huge mountain behind it and pine trees at the base of the mountain, and it was like a jagged rock formation mountain. And I was like, man, I wish I could take a picture of this. And then the ride from McComb to Yellow Pine, the last time I went there, I took Lick Creek Road back to McCall, but, every road is two roads. Depending on which direction you're going, you get a completely different view of it. And that's a real interesting metaphor for life, too. Especially like the first half of your life, you have one view of the way life works. And then you kind of get to the middle, and then you realize you're on the backside of it, and you have a whole different view. But that's something that's a whole nother topic we might even get to today. But it's a beautiful road from Yellow Pine to McComb, but it's a fucking stunning, ridiculous road from McComb to Yellow Pine. Like, one of the prettiest I've ever been on in my life. And I've been on a lot. And I was just stunned. And come to think of it, I wonder if I felt like it was more beautiful because I wasn't able to take pictures, so I had to take it all in with my mind because I couldn't stop and pull over and take a picture whenever I wanted. I don't think that's the case, but it is. That's a point to think on later. I'm going to do it again sooner rather than later, though, and see what it's all about, and see if it was my perspective. But, once I got out there, I was like, if the bike breaks down, the bike breaks down. But, the bike doesn't really break down much, if ever. It's that's one of those things where you worry about circumstances that are very not likely to happen. I've been running a long time now, and I've never once not been able to get back to my house. I've never once broken my ankle, sprained my ankle, tweaked my knee. Yet, I would always, if I was just leaving the house, which most runs I would leave just with my keys and a $20 bill. And I would take a $20 bill with me just in case I needed to get a taxi home for some reason. And it's that's never happened. But in my head, I'm like, well, what if I twist my ankle? And it's I guess that's the point of the phrase, what's the worst that could happen? And you think to yourself, what's the worst that could happen? Let me prepare for that. But if you're really thinking about worst case scenario all the time, that's sort of, what parents do nowadays to their kids, wrapping them in bubble wrap before they let them out of the house. And that doesn't help anybody. So, what's the worst that could happen is more of a rhetorical question. But if you really think what's the worst that could happen, you'll never leave your house. You'll become a complete shut-in. But the road was fucking stunning. I did not miss my phone, other than wanting to take some pictures. I found an amazing campsite. I had scouted out different campsites, possible places to camp. There were some actual campsites. And then I ended up finding this dirt road that wasn't technically a place where you're supposed to camp, but you can't camp because it's all national forest land. And I found this place that was right by the creek, and you're not technically supposed to camp right by a creek. You're supposed to be 100 feet from a water source, and I don't know, I was probably 50. But you know what I mean? Rules are made to be bent, brother. Yeah. And yeah, I found a nice clearing by the river, and I set my hammock up between two trees and could hear it was like a rapid river. It was the East Fork of the South Fork of the Salmon River. I don't know what that means, but I know that's what the map told me. And yeah, I just found this amazing place, and I set up my hammock. I set up my tent just as I love to not set up my tent at all, but I was if a storm comes or whatever, it's a good idea. If you're going to be sleeping in a hammock with no covering, it's a good idea to set up a tent too. Just in case a storm comes in the middle of the night, you can run into the tent and not get wet setting it up, and then you'll be soaked, and that would suck. In the end, I didn't need to at all. I slept in my hammock for both nights. I stayed there Friday night and Saturday night, and dude, there's nothing like sleeping in a hammock under the stars next to a river that's actually rolling pretty hard with rapids and rocks underneath causing rapids, because you really hear the water moving, and it's wonderful. It didn't cause me to piss my pants. You have that idea sometimes of is the sound of water, is that going to make me piss my pants? But it didn't. And I hung out there. I went into Yellow Pine once each day, and they do have a little cell service in Yellow Pine, and the Yellow Pine Tavern has Wi-Fi. Pretty slow Wi-Fi, but pretty slow by their accord, but it's about the same as the Wi-Fi works up here where I live. But I went in there, and I wasn't I want to check my messages, saw other people in there using their phones. Didn't bother me at all. It was just in my moment, in my zen, and it was wonderful. And I brought 3 books. I read 1.5 of them. I read The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, and I read half of Walden by Henry David Thoreau, and the other book I brought I did not get to. Hopefully I will, because it's due back at the library on the 30th, which is Wednesday, so shit, I better get to reading. Maybe they'll let me extend it again. I called the library, the McCollum Public Library, and I was like, my book is due today. This was a few weeks ago. And I was like, can I extend this book? And they were like, yeah. I was like, I don't have to come in. They're like, no, we got you. How about bring it back June 30th? I was like, oh my God, that's so cool. So I did a lot of reading, and I'm going to get to some of that reading. I made a lot of notes, but I want to get to the last 2 weeks of this podcast have been intense. right? I did that 3-hour podcast with Toby Morse, which I was supposed to be interviewing him. He turned it into an interview of me and my mental health struggles and everything I've been through. And I talked about all the sexual abuse that I'd been through and physical abuse. Not even all of it, you know. There's so much still that I didn't get into. I didn't know, you know, maybe someday I'll be like, hey, I'll detail all of it. Maybe I won't, but then the following week, last week's podcast, I was kind of still suffering a little shell shock of all that, and I think I'm at the other side of that. I'm feeling pretty good, giving it a lot of contemplation and thought, and I posted a pretty long thing on my Facebook, because I know not everybody's going to listen to a podcast, right? So I was like, I wanted to get it out there, and it felt like it was like coming out, right? It was like, you know, akin to, I'm not going to say it was the same thing, but it was akin to coming out as gay. It was like coming out with something that it's been stigmatized by society and kind of owning it and saying, this is who I am, this is what I've been through, this is what I've dealt with. So it felt like a mental health kind of coming out party. And I got a lot of messages from people, tons of messages, right? Like, I put it on Facebook, where there's 250 something comments. As of last Thursday, I think, I had replied to over 200 of them, and I was working my way through, and it's fucking hard, you know? Trying to let everybody know that I appreciate their comments by replying back with a full on and thought out comment of my own. Obviously, some people just wrote you know, a little heart emoji, in which I wrote a heart emoji back. But if someone took the time, which many people did, to write something more involved, thank you for sharing, takes strength, courage, blah, blah, all that kind of stuff. So I tried to write something more back, and that took a lot out of me, and I still have a lot of messages to get to. I got a lot of text messages, I got a lot of private messages on Facebook, got fucking phone calls, and it's too much, you know? It's too much all at once, and I've just been trying to manage it as well as I can, and I hope and assume people understand that if I don't get back to them right away, you know, I'm not ignoring them. Or it's not that I don't think their comments and messages of support were meaningful, because of course they are. But it's a lot to fucking process. On top of just processing within myself that I let all that stuff out, and then processing all the inputs that people are giving me. And I'll get there eventually, but I've also been trying to use my phone less and trying to trying to reply to people in general less. And I was always, for years and years, and even post-treatment, was always the guy trying to keep the conversation going with my friends. And now I'm like, you know what? It doesn't fucking matter. If I don't get back to someone, it's not because I don't like them or don't care about them. It's I read the message, cool. Not every text conversation needs to be a running conversation, and I'm learning that slowly. It's nice to get back to people, of course, but sometimes it's someone's got to leave the last message, right? You're having a conversation back and forth, and sometimes someone writes something, and you're like, cool, all right, I see it, but whatever. I don't have the fucking bandwidth. I don't want to have the bandwidth to reply to every single person, because that's part of what drove me crazy. So yeah, the last 2 weeks have been a lot, but I've been, managing fairly well, especially in the last week. The first week was pretty tough, and that's what led to last week's podcast just being I don't know, most of that podcast last week I feel was just depressing. If not depressive, depressing. I don't know if you people listen to it, I guess. Nobody told me it sucked. I just kind of felt that way, while I was recording it. I was like, oh, God. But also, I think I said in last week's podcast, that's a lot of times that's what people respond to, is the rawness and vulnerability, and understanding that, even on days when I'm supposed to be up to record this, sometimes I just can't get up. And I don't fake it, I think maybe that's what people are responding to on this podcast, I hope, is that I'm never faking it. Sometimes I'm super energetic, happy. Sometimes I'm super down and sad. And sometimes I'm in the middle. Today I'm probably I'm above average. I'm not in the middle, but I'm not super spunked out. Though I may get there. But talking about coming out, right? So I was thinking about how it was just bearing so many vulnerabilities all at once to the quote unquote world. Especially putting it out there. Like, putting it out on Toby's podcast was not hard. Putting it out on my podcast was hard. But even harder than that, I think, was, oh, what's up, kitty cat? Neighbor's got a cat. Little black cat. Come here. Come here, Cosmo. Cosmo. Anyway, Cosmo just wants to hang out. So yeah, writing about it on my Facebook, that was hard, because I knew a lot more people would read it on my Facebook page than would actually take the time to listen to the conversation. And in retrospect, maybe I should have written something longer, but I'm sure I will. Oh, we got you. If you're watching on video, you get to see this little kitty cat. Hey, little kitty cat, Cosmo. Can you meow for us? But yeah, putting that out was like, that was super vulnerable, and just letting everybody know. And like, I know a lot of people read that shit and didn't comment on it, obviously, but read it. And I heard from a friend, she was at another friend's 50th birthday party over the weekend, and he was telling her he had all these nice things to say about me. And how he had read what I went through, and how he had no idea, and it just made him think I was even stronger. And I forget that, because I think sometimes I'm like, well, only the people who commented or let me know that they read it have read it. But no, it's more than that. And so now it's just out there, and it's like, how's that going to make me feel when I see people I know? I don't know. Like, on a day-to-day thing, I kind of forget about it, I guess. And I don't think anyone in McCollum is listening to my podcast, except for Holly at the post office. But, so I'm not, like, worried about how people are going to see me when I walk around here. But, like, maybe when I go back to New York, are people going to be like, hey, I'm sorry that happened to you. And by that point, it's going to be like, I don't want to talk about this. And honestly, I don't want to talk about it to most people. I've had a bunch of people, hey, I'm going to give you a call. And it's like, okay, cool, you can give me a call. But, like, I hope those calls don't lead to, like, hey, sorry. Yeah. Do you want to talk about it? He's like, no, I don't want to talk about it. I talked about it with Toby. That's like, if you want to, if you'd like to hear me talk about it, then you can listen to my podcast. But the idea of this being coming out, so this is one of the notes I made this week. Dan Savage, who is a gay advice columnist, and apparently got in a lot of trouble recently for some weird shit. Something he said. I don't need to get into that. But he wrote something on Twitter recently, this past week. So an NFL player came out and said he was gay, and he was the first active NFL player to ever come out. And everybody was lauding him and saying, the courage, the strength. And sure, obviously, fuck yeah, man. Like, you're going to be in a locker room full of NFL dudes. That's weird, right? Like, that takes a lot of, like, balls to be like, I'm going to come out and say I'm gay, especially in a culture that probably is not very accepting of that, because it's so macho. Meanwhile, probably a lot of gay NFL players. I know one who came out after he retired. He used to play for the 49ers. His name was Quaim something or other. He's a friend of a friend. We actually spent 2 weeks in Thailand together. Not just me and him, but there was a whole group of us. Anyway, Dan Savage had to say, ballet dancers and drag queens made it safe for football players to come out, not the other way around. Effeminate men who couldn't hide who they were and were constantly told they were weak because our misogynistic culture associated femininity with weakness, those guys made it safe for masculine men to come out. And when I read that, I was like, damn, that was the first time I put in perspective that it was important, me sharing all the struggles that I've had, like, that I really realized that was important in helping other people. And I think I said on here last week that I've got some messages from people who said that they're seeking their own help and therapy and treatment for issues they've been through because of what I brought up in my podcast. And I'm like, that's where it's at, man, right? That's where it's at. It's like, it's not that I don't care about the messages of encouragement that I got from friends, because I had a bunch, and I said this last week, some of them ring hollow, and some still do. When I went through reading them all, it's like, I don't want to get messages from my friends because they found out that I went through all of this. I want to get messages from my friends because they like me and because something they see online makes them think of me and sends me a message, or they just want to send me a postcard because they're thinking about me, or just a message saying, hey, dude, I was thinking about you, for whatever reason. That's the way I communicate to my friends. That's how I want to be communicated with. I don't want to be communicated with under the auspices of like, hey, are you okay? Nothing makes me feel worse than when someone asks me how I'm doing. And when that's the only text, it's just, hey, how are you? You okay? Everything okay? Especially if they didn't know what I've been going through. It's like, fuck you, man. Like, that's... The subtext of a message like that says, I think that you're not all right, so I'm checking to see if you are all right. And it's like, that's not your friend really checking on. That's not your friend being friends with you. That's just your friend, like, checking on you. And it almost feels like someone's doing that out of a sense of obligation. I just want... just messages out of the blue. Hey, how are you? How's it going? That type of thing. But, so the thing about coming out that Dan Savage wrote was that it's not necessarily about, like, when I put all that out there, it wasn't to get messages and feedback from my friends. It was more to, like, get it off my shoulders and to let people know that it's okay. Like, if you're struggling, it's okay. You're not the only one. You're not alone. I've been through it. And I think it was especially important to put on social media because I... like everybody, have painted a pretty rosy picture of my life on social media, because that's what we do. We only post the good parts, right? We don't post the bad parts, for the most part. Some people do, and we don't like those people. Like, if you have a friend who's always complaining on social media, you've probably unfollowed them, right? I know I have. So, yeah, it was important to be like, hey, my life isn't always great. Like, I may put all this stuff on social media, but, like, I was fucking struggling a lot. And that's hence, years ago, I named my blog, I'm Almost Always Having More Fun Than You. And I didn't understand why I named it that until I went through, really faced my demons and my struggles. And that almost was a very important word. Because at first, when I came up with it, I thought it was kind of like funny, tongue-in-cheek, that like, I'm pretty much always doing something cooler than you are. But what it turned out to be, the subtext of that was like, I am very oftentimes doing something very cool. That's just the way I live my life. But the subtext is, I'm almost always having more fun than you, because the almost is like, yeah, I may be out here doing crazy things and adventuring and rafting and motorcycle riding and jumping off fucking bridges, bungee jumping and shit like that, but it's like the almost is so key, because it's like, yeah, I'm almost having more fun, but like I should be, but there's always that mental block of depression and anxiety that keeps me fucked up. So on to my reading. Reading week. I have been struggling with reading a lot. I'd say for like a third of my adult life, I have been a voracious reader. I just devour books. And most of my childhood, I read a lot too, but I'm kind of going in, and throughout school, I read a lot, but that was a different time. But I'm saying for my adult life, like 18, 19 onward, when I left school, for about a third of that, I was a voracious reader. 2/3 of that, I wouldn't read at all. I'd just be out getting fucked up. I know some people enjoy a glass of wine, a beer, and reading along with that. I could never do that. I could never read when I was drunk. The times I did read when I'd been drinking, I'd wake up the next day and have to read it all over again. And honestly, most of the time I spent drinking to the point of failure. Meaning, I would drink till I passed out. And so that didn't leave much time for reading. But yeah, so for about a third of it, I've been a voracious reader. And last summer, when I was camping and on my motorcycle a lot and really just chilling in the woods, I was reading a lot. I ended up reading this book called Shantaram, which had been chasing me around forever. It's 900 pages long. Highly, highly, highly recommended if you have the bandwidth to read a 900-page book. It's a story of a guy who escapes prison in Australia, ends up in India working in the underworld, kind of a drug dealer, kind of an arms dealer, just all sorts of nefarious situations. And it's basically a book of philosophy framed around the story of the guy's life. It's intense, it's awesome. I underlined more passages in that book than I think I ever have of any other book. But for some reason, since last fall, I've been really struggling to just pay attention to anything. And I've started a bunch of books, and I haven't finished that many, and I'm just like, I've thought a lot about it. Is it the book? And it would go to my phone or go to TV, or like I want to put music on. It was just some mental block that was not letting me stick with a book for more than 10 or 15 minutes at a time. And you really need to like give a book a half hour, 45 minutes, an hour generally to like really settle into it and get into the flow of what the writer's saying. And I can't listen to books on tape. They don't really work for me. My mind wanders too much. I can't focus on them when the words are in front of me and I'm reading them off the page, so they really get there. So one of the books I read this weekend was Tom Sawyer, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain, which I had read when I was a kid. And I know that book had gotten in some trouble recently for using the N-word, and I gotta say it was quite jarring to see that, come across that word a few times in the text while I was reading the book, and I was like, ugh. But I don't believe in censoring books, and it's like that. Well, that was the parlance of the times, to borrow a quote from Maud Lebowski. See, that part was jarring, but overall the book is pretty good until the ending, man. Fucking trick switch ending I did not see coming, and I kind of fucking hate it. And I hope I'm not spoiling this book for anybody. I assume most people read it when they were young. I don't know how many people came back to it, but I think when I was young, it probably felt like a very happy ending. But nowadays, as a 47 and 3/4-year-old man, I found it quite disconcerting, the ending of that book. And so the story is of Tom Sawyer, a kind of ne'er-do-well kid. Kind of ne'er-do-well. He's like, he's like a little rascal, so to speak. I think a lot of us saw ourselves in Tom Sawyer as a kid. And he tricked other kids into doing his chores for them, and was always kind of like, had a little hustler in him. And lived with his aunt, and so he wasn't like full on from a good family. So he meets Huck Finn, who is like the son of a drunkard, and his mother is dead or gone, and he's got no shoes and doesn't speak English very well, and nobody in the village really likes him, and they always assume he's going to be trouble. I think we all had friends like that. A lot of us were the friend like that. I think a lot of us were an amalgamation of both of them. But they kind of they form a little friendship. They run away. They pretend they're dead. They pretend their boat got capsized. They let the town think they're dead. Then they burst in on their own funeral. Hijinks like that. But then there's this guy Injun Joe, and they see Injun Joe kill a guy, then blame it on someone else, and they know these secrets. And then eventually Tom Sawyer testifies at his trial, and it comes out that he's the one who knew that Injun Joe was the killer. So Injun Joe escapes the courthouse, breaks through the window, and disappears. And now Tom Sawyer's like, fuck, is Injun Joe going to come get me? But then they somehow stumble upon Injun Joe again and find out that he's got all this treasure. And then him and Huck kind of follow Injun Joe. And long story short, they end up... Injun Joe dies inside a cave where Tom and Becky got lost, but they figured out where the booty was that Injun Joe had. And so the end of the book is supposed to be a happy ending, that Injun Joe dies inside the cave. He gets sealed inside the cave by the townspeople. They don't know he's in there, but they seal the cave so that no one else will ever get lost in there after Tom and Becky Thatcher get lost. So he tells the town, Injun Joe is in the cave. You sealed the cave with Injun Joe in it. So they go and they unseal the cave, and Injun Joe had been trying to claw his way out, so his dead body's there. Then Huck and Tom break back into the cave, find the buried treasure that he had left in there. It turns out to be worth $12,000, which in that time was like a fucking fortune. And what happens with that money is right up until then, it's like, okay, happy ending. And then Tom goes to his aunt, and she controls his $6,000 of the fortune, and she starts loaning it out, and so that he can live on the interest. So now he's like a banker, right? And he's got all this money. He starts loaning it to other people, and the interest that he's making off loaning the money out is more than enough to pay for his own lifestyle. And then he says to Huck, "Hey, you can do it too." And someone looks after Huck's money. I think it was the old Welshman. It decides he's going to look after Huck's money, and then Huck Finn comes to Tom and says, "Yo, I don't want this money, man. I don't want the responsibility of this money. I've always been poor. I enjoyed being poor. I want to be poor. You take my money." And then Tom is like, "No, Huck. I'm going to start a group of robbers, and we're going to be cool pirate robber people, and you should be in my gang. You should be in my robber gang, but only if you also take your half of the money and loan it out and become like move into the Welshman's house or whoever ends up adopting him, and like you got to become a respectable member of society and a rich man, and then we'll be rich man robbers together. And I'm like, what the fuck? Let Huck be poor. Huck realizes that there's way more to life than being rich, and that being rich will warp your perception of reality, and like money does not bring you happiness, right? And Tom fucking pulls him right back in, and that's how the book ends. And I'm like, this is not a happy ending. Maybe Mark Twain thought it was a happy ending. I don't know. I'm gonna read the follow-up though, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. I think that's the follow-up. Pretty sure, but I'm gonna read that, and I want to see what the fuck happens, because I was despondent. I was not happy, especially. There's parallels in life, right, to everything you read, and I think you read things at the time you need to read them, and they affect you in a certain way. But like lately, I'm finding a lot of acceptance of being poor, and I kind of dig it. It definitely stresses me out in some ways, especially like, you know, I want to have my business. I do have a business. I want it to relaunch, and I want to be able to make a certain amount of money with it. But I don't want to use it. I want to use it to make enough money to live. I don't want to live in order to sustain this business, you know? So I want to go back to booking a lot less shows than I did. And like, I certainly understand the value of money and of having some and saved and maybe invested in certain ways. But like, it's not all about money. And that's what I'm learning. And the next book, that's just what I'm learning in life in general, you know? So reading about that in a book with that ending, it just left me with a bitter taste in my mouth. I was like, what the fuck, man? Like, Huck was trying to become a socialist, right? He was like just trying to be like, hey man, whatever, just give me a dime every now and then, is what he said to Tom Sawyer. Like, take all the money, give me a dime every now and then. I won't even need it much, because there's not much I can get with a dime that I can't get otherwise, and just the satisfaction of life. So then that leads me to the next book that I had brought that I went to read was Walden by Henry David Thoreau. And he wrote a book about his 2 years living on Walden Pond in a house he constructed by himself with his own hands. That's kind of the whole point of the book. And Walden Pond is in Concord, Massachusetts, which for some reason is where I was born. Both of my sisters were born at Lowell General Hospital. It's where my whole family was from, where we grew up. Lowell, Massachusetts. And for some reason my mother had this doctor who had moved from Lowell General Hospital to Emerson Hospital in Concord, which was much further away from where we lived, obviously. And I was born in Concord, in the birthplace of the American Revolution, where the first shots were fired. And I've always never forgotten that, but I also didn't know anything about Concord growing up. My parents never took me there. My mother would remind me that I was born there, but I never really spent any time there. And I've always meant to read this book. I was born in Emerson Hospital, which is named after Ralph Waldo Emerson, the poet and philosopher who owned the land that Henry David Thoreau built his cabin on. So Thoreau's book is about how he was kind of an odd job guy running around, and then he went and lived in this cabin, sawed down trees, planed the trees, built himself a little shack, bought another guy's like shack that was about to collapse for the boards and planks, and then used that for his flooring and his roofing. And the book is all about, or at least the half of it I've gotten through so far, is about, you know, the joys of living sort of off the land. He was planting his own crops, but he wasn't way out there in the middle of nowhere. That's an interesting thing that people, I think the time sort of tells us that the point of the book was that he was really living in the middle of nowhere. And in fact, in one of the opening sentences, he says his nearest neighbor was more than a mile away. But also, the deeper you get into the book, you see that like he had people come to visit him all the time. He could hear the railroad that would take commuters to work in Boston every day. He could hear the trains chug by and the whistle blow. So he wasn't really off in the middle of nowhere. But it was about, you know, solace, not solitude. Solitude is weird. Like, Ted Kaczynski lived in solitude. He didn't talk to anyone. He lived outside of a town in Montana. He had a bicycle. He would go into town, go to the library every now and then, but like otherwise didn't talk to anyone. He just talked to the one woman at the library. That's sort of solitude. Solace, I feel like more, it's just like joy in spending time with yourself and being alone, where solitude almost feels negative, like you're purposely cutting yourself off from people. That's not what Thoreau did. That's certainly not what I'm doing up here. I may be physically distant from a lot of people, but I stay in touch with them. Obviously, you're listening to me talk, and I was just talking about getting away from my phone and texting and all of that. But there's some shit in this book. There were some things that I made notes of. A lot of things I made notes of. And, okay, let's see. Number one note here in the chapter, Economy. It's all about philanthropy. Right. Philanthropy I find to be really odd. And, because just people throwing money at problems, right? Whenever you hear someone's a philanthropist, they donate money to things. They don't really do things, right? And then you hear about, like, Jeff Bezos' wife took half his money in the divorce and is giving it all away and is a noted philanthropist now. And Bill Gates' wife, they're getting a divorce and she's devoting her life to philanthropy. And Warren Buffett is devoting his fortune to philanthropy and only leaving a tiny fraction to his kids and donating the rest to charity. And Elon Musk recently gave away $100 million. And people are like, what a philanthropist. But, like, money doesn't solve problems, man. Money starts charitable foundations, and the people who run those charitable foundations tend to make a whole lot of money. And there's obviously tons of research. Not even research, just articles published about, like, if you're a nonprofit organization, you have to make all your finances public, and there's so many nonprofit organizations that people think do a lot of great things, and then you find out that, like, for every dollar donated, 85% goes to running the nonprofit and only 15% goes to what they're supposed to be doing. So philanthropy's always bothered me. It's always bothered me that, like, rich dudes put their name on a museum or a building or something, and sorry to be sexist, but, like, rich wives often run a nonprofit or run a foundation, and it's like just a way for them to have parties and get together. And I've seen it time and time and time again in the charity world with music benefit shows, where it's like an artist is playing this benefit and it's $1,000 a head, but the artist gets his full fee, and they're putting the benefit on at one of these big fancy places. What are those ones? I can't. What's the Italian name that they? I can't think. They have It's like this big Italian private facility thing. Whatever, it doesn't matter what the name is in Manhattan. And then you're like, well, what the fuck? Like, how much money got raised, but how much went right out the door paying for these black tie events? And you got Questlove DJing and, Janet Jackson playing. And it's like, yeah, it was $1,000 or $10,000 a person. But by the time it's over, the event grossed $10 million, but only $1 million ends up getting donated to this charity, and then of the $1 million that gets donated to the charity, where does it all go? So, like, philanthropy is just a tricky game, man, that people play to say, I donated money to this, I gave money to that, but, like, I've always thought, like, philanthropy is what you do with yourself, and your time and your money, and, like, for most of my career, adult life, when I started making money, people I would get hit up a lot. Donate to this, donate to that, donate to charity. And it's like, I would always say, I have my charity. It's Rodney. All right. I took one person in my life and I made things much better for him. I made sure he had jobs. I paid his rent. I bought him clothes. I took him to concerts. And, like, he was my friend. He became my best friend. But it didn't start as us being best friends. That developed over time. It was like almost like a Big Brother organization, where I was like, I'm not going to donate $100 to the United Way. I'm going to take that $100 and buy Rodney a fucking ticket to see Bon Jovi. And we're going to go, and I'm going to make this one kid's life better. And so it really struck me when I was reading what Thoreau said. And it's interesting to remember that the dude wrote this book in 1845. Like, that's a fucking 180 years ago, But, like, so many things just, they still stand up. And someone actually wrote this, you know what I mean? It's not like the Bible. People say, oh, the Bible, that's 2,000 years old. That still stands up. That's a complete work of fiction. Like, nobody even knows who really wrote that shit in the Bible. And it's been translated so many times. This book was written in English by a dude who lived in America and who saw what was going on in society and decided he wanted to separate from it for a little bit. So I think that's way more important to know that these lessons actually stand true 180 years later. But, He says, I would not subtract anything from the praise that is due to philanthropy, but merely demand justice for all who by their lives and works are a blessing to mankind. I do not value chiefly a man's uprightness and benevolence, which are, as it were, his stem and leaves, those plants of whose greenness withered we make herb tea for the sick serve but a humble use, and are most employed by quacks. And he goes on to say, here's the part where I really underlined, I want the flower and fruit of a man, that some fragrance be wafted over from him to me, and some ripeness flavor our intercourse. His goodness must not be a partial and transitory act, but a constant superfluity, which costs him nothing and of which he is unconscious. This is a charity that hides a multitude of sins. The philanthropist too often surrounds mankind with the remembrance of his own cast-off griefs as an atmosphere and calls it sympathy. We should impart our courage and not our despair, our health and ease and not our disease. Man, that says so much, right? Like, philanthropy isn't just giving money to people and, like, building some charity housing that's shitty to remind people that they're poor. Philanthropy is like, how do you spend your time? How do you make the people around you? How do you enrich the people around you? How do you enrich your community? And I guess rich people say, oh, we pay a lot of taxes and that enriches the community. But, like, the more people make in this society, the less they pay in taxes. So that doesn't hold up, right? If you're just giving money away, most people are giving money away for a tax deduction, so they have to pay even less taxes. So just the idea that someone gives money away is like, that's just fruity to me. And I thought it was, very interesting to see that this dude had that figured out back 180 years ago, that it's not about what you give away, what you fund with your money. It's about how you live your life on a day-to-day basis. And that leads to this next quote, which is a whole different section of the book. But it's actually a different chapter. First chapter was economy. This is what I lived for. But he goes on to say, we must learn to reawaken and keep ourselves awake, not by mechanical aids, but by an infinite expectation of the dawn, which does not forsake us in our soundest sleep. I know of no more encouraging fact than the unquestionable ability of man to elevate his life by a conscious endeavor. It is something to be able to paint a particular picture or to carve a statue and so to make a few objects beautiful, but it is far more glorious to carve and paint the very atmosphere and medium through which we look, which morally we can do. To affect the quality of the day, that is the highest of arts. And that's the same thing that we were just talking about in the previous chapter. To keep ourselves awake, to learn to reawaken and keep ourselves awake, and to affect the equality of the day, that is the highest of the arts. And that's all within us, right? Like, oftentimes I wonder why I'm having a shitty day, why things got off to a bad start, and it's like, because I don't affect the quality of my own day on a lot of days. And it's like, you affect the quality of your day by, like, waking up, doing some stretching, drinking a glass of water before you look at your phone. I don't do all these things every day. I don't do them all most days. But I know what needs to be done and what should be done. Nothing needs to be done. What should be, the difference between what should be done and what I do, that affects the quality of my day, oftentimes in a negative way. But, like, getting out, going for a walk, sometimes being like, I get filled with so much anxiety. Even this morning, before I did this podcast, I have a whole list of things I need to do. Things that are like, things I've put on myself, things I need to do for Rocks Off, for upcoming shows. But it's like, what do I really need to do? I really need to take care of myself. I need to affect the quality of my own day by going for a walk, by meditating, by stretching, by doing some yoga, by just sitting and breathing. You don't even have to be meditating. Just, like, look out at the trees and contemplate them. And, you can affect the quality of your own day. You have that power. You make that choice every moment of the day. And you choose to be anxious. You choose to focus on the things you, quote unquote, need to be doing instead of the things that you could do or should do that are going to help you feel better in the long run. And, work, obviously, like, work is all about that. I saw something, there's a big story in the New York Times yesterday about how, open plan offices. Everyone wants people back in their offices, but open plan offices where people don't have private offices are like responsible for giving people more anxiety and making them less productive. And it's like, of course, everybody puts headphones on, they stare at their screen. Nobody wants someone looking over their shoulder. Nobody wants to be hearing somebody else's conversation. That's why the office system developed. The only reason companies started having open offices is they said that it increased, people being able to communicate and open, freely sharing of ideas. But like, the bosses have offices, right? Like, the boss has his office over in the corner. Like, look at The Wolf of Wall Street. Remember that movie? I know it's just a movie, but like, a few guys had offices and everybody else was out on the trading floor talking to each other. But the whole idea of like open plan offices being more productive, no, it's so that everybody can be monitored and can know and feel that they're being monitored, and because it saves money, you can cram a lot more people in a lot less space. And then, we have a ping pong table and a snack area and some bean bags over there. Well, that's not enough to counteract that whole thing, and that just leads to more and more anxiety. Man, I feel bad for people who have to go back to offices. I don't feel bad for people who have to work. We all have to work in one way or another, right? We all have to earn a living, and we decide how hard we want to work. In a perfect world, we would decide how hard we want to work, how much time we want to get put in, be rewarded for that time. And I guess in certain ways you do, because you move up the corporate ladder if you work harder. But you don't really get rewarded for working harder or more hours in corporate world. You get rewarded more for kissing ass, at least from what I've seen. But yeah, going back to you can affect the quality of your day. It's very important to remember that you're the one who affects the quality of your day, and other inputs can come. And sure, you can have a boss, and your boss can be a dick, but like, you can only let that be so much of your unhappiness, because you still have, even if you're working 8 hours a day, you still have another 2/3 of your day. It's fucking ridiculous, by the way, that people work 8-hour days. That's normal. People work longer than that, especially when you take into effect commutes, which I think you should get paid for your commute. Like, I would consider like working, like, there was this situation where I was like, I almost had a job in town. I don't need to get into the nitty gritty, but I went and talked to this guy, and like, I was gonna go to work for him, and it didn't end up happening. Kind of got called off the day I was supposed to start, but I was getting my shit together, and the night before I was like, I gotta make lunch tomorrow, and I gotta do all that. Totally understandable. But then I was like, all right, I'm supposed to start work at noon. I gotta walk out my door at 11:30 so I can get to my car, start it up, drive into town, park my car, get into work, and be ready to start at noon. I was like, well, I should get paid from 11:30. Right? I should get paid from 11:30 a.m. And I told my friend that, a friend of mine, and he was like, what would you say if people who worked for you had that shit to say? And I was like, I would totally consider it. If someone, like, and I have considered it. I've had situations at Rocksoft where people are like, I have to come from here, and it's awkward, and it takes me a while to get here and get back, and I get a little more money for doing this work. Because when we do work on boats, I do shift pay. I don't do hourly pay. So it's like, sometimes it's a late load in, band gets set up quick, the boat gets back, band gets out quick. Okay, you get paid the same amount that you would for a long day, and it evens itself out. And I've always just liked it that way. I know a lot of people in the music business do it that way. You get paid this much per show. And then, obviously, if things go super over, I would give people bonuses and raises. Like, we do the show every year with the machine. And that it's a super early load-in from them because they have a lot of gear. They got lights set up. So I have to take that into consideration, and I pay people more for those shows. But I've had situations where people have come to me and like, hey, I want more money. So when my friend was like, what would you say if someone told you they wanted to be paid from the moment they left their door? And I'm like, well, I would consider it. I have considered it, and I have paid people more money for that. But I think it's important to understand it. Like, an 8-hour workday is really a 9-hour workday because you have the lunch break, and then you have your time getting to and from work, that's not your time. Sure, you can kind of read a book, but you don't want to be doing that, which is why telecommuting and working from home is much smarter and better now. All right, my work day is from 9 to 5 or 10 to 6, whatever it is. Like, you open your laptop at 9, hopefully, and you start working then. But the whole idea of work, obviously, is kind of bullshit. And an 8-hour day, normalize the 4-hour work day. But even 6 hours seems much more humane, right? Like, that's a quarter of your day. If we're going to split days up into time, in segments of time and hours, like 25% feels way better and more normal and more rational than 30%. Okay, this next one, shit. Okay. Now this gets to leisure time and work. Oh my God, it's almost like I put these notes in order on purpose. He says, the student who secures his coveted leisure and retirement by systematically shirking any labor necessary to man obtains but an ignoble and unprofitable leisure, defrauding himself of the experience which alone can make leisure fruitful. And that really stuck with me, because what he's saying there is, if you don't work, then you can't have a vacation. You can't appreciate leisure without putting in the work to earn it. And I believe in that. So that's why I've been working down on this farm recently. And, it's not a real job. I'm volunteering, getting paid in greens. But I wanted to work to give the rest of my week and my days structure and feeling. Because since the pandemic started, I haven't really worked at all. That's a real lie. Like, I worked at, like, producing masks and all that, and I made some money doing that at the beginning of the pandemic. But since I left New York, so I guess, I wasn't really working. So it was almost a full year of no work, no actual work. It was kind of like working on shows here and there, moving things around, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But, I wouldn't really call that work, just kind of maintaining. But so the idea of having all this time off, the idea of having all this leisure, it was supposed to feel great. But it doesn't feel great, because you don't appreciate the leisure if you haven't put the work in to earn the leisure. And that's what Thoreau was talking about right there. And I found that so striking, because, again, it tied right to my personal life and what I've been going through. And I think the last couple of years of my life before I went into treatment was the same thing. Like, I was just always leisuring. I was working as little as possible, just barely maintaining my business. And I would go through spurts of I'm going to send a bunch of offers out and try to make some shows happen. But that was just to give the impression that I was keeping the wheels on and to make sure I had enough work for my staff. It was way more about that than making money for myself or furthering Rocks Off. It was I was paying Karina a full-time salary. Backyard Bill was getting paid as a production manager, and it was I had a lot of people who looked to me for a significant part of their income for freelance work too. So I was just kind of going through the motions to take care of everybody. But so then when I was off on my motorcycle or going to Tokyo or wherever the fuck I was flying off to, it didn't feel good because I didn't earn it. I wasn't I'm taking a well-earned break and vacation. And I've worked 3 weeks on that farm now with Patsy and Dan. And it's just 2 days a week, 6 hours a day, which is a lot when you're in the hot sun. But I took that on as a way to give my week structure and to be hey, all right, if I commit to working with them and helping them out 2 days a week, then that's going to make me appreciate the other 5 days. And it's not, it's not like having a full-time job and have only 2 days off, but I don't need a job. Or I wasn't looking for a job. I need work, but yeah, I guess that's another discussion. But the idea was, if I commit to going to their farm 2 days a week and helping them out and getting my hands dirty and working in the sun, that will structure the rest of my week and my days so that I'm okay, well, if I want to do some writing, I have to do it in this time or that time. And if I want to do painting, because I was finding myself just too often waking up, just being what do I do today? I don't know. I could do anything. I don't want to do it. I could also do nothing, and it doesn't matter. And the idea of leisure and days off and enjoy that leisure, you have to work for it. And it's just to enjoy money, you have to work for it. It's like anything else. And free time is a commodity just like anything else. And if you have an unlimited supply of it, it's not going to mean anything to you. And Thoreau had that one nailed too. I'm going to get to more Thoreau quotes at some point because I'm only halfway through the book. I'm going to bore you with more of this. It feels so trite and cliched, right? It's the dude goes off into the woods for a weekend and reads Thoreau and comes back and pontificates about it. But If I'm cliched, I'm cliched. That's okay. And I'm smiling. If you're watching this, you can see that. This is on YouTube. For those of you just listening to the podcast, you could see me baking in the hot sun out here. I've struggled with where I'm going to do this filming, and I've done it out in the woods on some days, and I've done it on my porch, and I've done it out by my motorcycle, and like, I got a mic stand and a laptop stand and a stand to put my notebook on and my drinks, and I got my chair, and it's like hauling all that out into the woods is, some days I'm just like, I don't want to deal with it, and then I'm like, you got to try to position yourself because you need the light to be in your face, so it'll look good on the video. You don't want the light shining in the camera, just basics of photography and videography. But the sun moves throughout the day, so I don't know how long is it going to be shady there, how long am I going to go on this, and I'm still learning along the way, and I'm very much out in the hot sun and sweating. I actually took a little coat rack out of my house and hung a towel on it to try to keep my computer from overheating. We're gone over an hour and it's still working though, so I guess the hot sun leads us to the next topic, climate change. And we're like, dude, it's in the 90s every day this week, which is usually as high as it gets, what I hear here in Macomb. Every day this week it's going to be in the mid-90s. Portland was 115 degrees last night. The whole Pacific Northwest is experiencing like insane temperatures. Like Portland, it's the highest it's ever been in recorded history. Yesterday, or it's Sunday. That's yesterday, yeah, to me, because I'm recording this on Monday. But, things are going fucking wild, man, and forest fire season's going to be starting sooner than it ever has, and it was a very tough year with the drought. But then I get a text last night from my friend Maddie DeLiso, who lives in Taos, New Mexico, and is a chef at the ski resort there, Taos Valley, which is at 9,000 feet. Sure, it should be cold there, colder than it is here at 6,000 feet, but it's fucking 37 degrees last night in Taos. And you're like, how is it 37 degrees in New Mexico, 115 degrees in Oregon, everywhere is dry, fires are about to be starting, things are just going fucking nuts, man, right? Like, is climate change a hoax? You know, I don't think so. But I read this last night from David Sirota. He said, among the worst parts of climate anxiety is knowing full well that when the Earth ends up literally just being one giant ball of fire, the final tweets will be Republicans insisting there's no climate crisis and Democrats saying they can't do anything because of the parliamentarian. And that just got me because, like, what is being done to combat climate change? Like, pretty much nothing. Like, there's talk about it, right? There's talk about electric cars and cutting carbon and offsetting your carbon footprint by buying carbon credits from companies that plant trees in your honor. But like more like real stuff has to be done to combat climate change. Like driving an electric car is not going to fucking fix the planet being on fire and forest fires every week, right? Like people just got to start using less. They got to start making less people. They got to start using less resources in general. Like, you just can't be flying everywhere. You just can't be shipping water everywhere, you know? Like the idea of like single-use plastics over plastic bottles. It's like, why are you drinking bottled water at all, man? Like, why am I drinking Poland spring water in fucking, Florida? Or that shit comes from Poland Spring, Maine. Why are you drinking water that got put on a truck and driven to you? Like, how much carbon does that eat up? Like, why are you drinking water that was made in Fiji? Why are you drinking even Liquid Death, this hot new water, is water from the Alps, they say, in Austria? I don't know if that's true. But, no matter if it's true or not, no matter where it comes from, it came from somewhere, right? Like, the water came out of a fountain. Like, why don't you just drink your fucking tap water, man? And, like, get a filter on your tap. Or not. Like, most tap water's just fine. There's a zillion things that every human needs to do. Not just one or two. Not just like, oh, I'm not going to use straws because of the turtles, man. It's like, you're not going to use a straw in your Starbucks cup. Like, if climate change is real, which I think it is, and most rational people seem to agree it is, like, what's really being done to combat it? Like, kind of nothing. Like, everyone's like pointing to the government has to do this and do that, but it's like, I honestly, I don't know what can be done. But I know that, like, most people aren't doing much. We're all still driving cars, right? We're all still moving around as much as we want to. And I admit, I'm guilty of a lot of that, too. Like, and a lot of the reason I'm guilty of it is because, honestly, I don't fully give a fuck. Because I don't have kids. And I think I do a pretty good job reducing in some ways. But, like, even the fact that I'm saying that is horseshit. You know what I mean? I'm looking at this plastic tub. I get this big plastic cooler. I got a plastic tub I bought at Home Depot to store shit that I don't even really need. It's like, what am I doing? Like, why are we creating all this plastic? And it leads to something else that I read last night that says, the default assumption that if someone has the income to consume as much resources and energy as they want, they have the right to do so. If we want to survive the 21st century, we need to reject this logic. And that's fucking it, man. If I can afford to fly somewhere, I'm going to fly there, right? And if I can afford to put gas in my car and drive to Boise this week because I want to watch a hockey game with my buddy Kevin, I'm going to do that. Like, do I need to do that? No. Should I do that? No. Am I going to? Yes. Why? Because I don't give a fuck, right? And that's what it all comes down to. I'm not saying I'm proud of not giving a fuck. I'm just saying that's sort of the reality of it. Is like, do I need to ride my motorcycle to Yellow Pine? No. Like, everyone kind of needs to freeze. That's what I'm getting at. Is like, for climate change to really stop in any meaningful way, we all need to fucking stop. And that's kind of what the pandemic did for us, was give us all the ability to stop, right? Remember all those reports at the beginning of the pandemic about how the air was more cleaner than it's ever been, and like the reports of dolphins swimming in the Venice Canal, which turned out to be fake, because everything's fake nowadays. But the Earth was breathing again because nobody was going anywhere. There were no planes in the air, right? It was for the first time since the days of 9/11 that air travel was halted in a large degree across the world. And everything was like, nature was healing, as they say. And I talked about that before, that we were at like peak everything, peak culture, peak content, peak movies, peak TV production, peak food culture. Everything was at its peak, and the pandemic came and calmed us all down. And now everybody's in a rush to go again. Like, book concerts, book festivals. Let's get on boats. Let's do boat shows. Let's have cruise ships going out everywhere. Everybody can fly everywhere once again. And not because I care about the environment so much, I am not doing that. I am not buying back into that old society. And I wish I could say it was about the environment and like, I fucking care, man. But it's not. It's just I'm trying to figure out what's best for me and my own head. And that is staying still for the most part. And by still, I mean like not flying places. Like, and even like, I don't even go into town that often. When I first got up here to Macomb, I was going into town almost every day. Not on purpose, just like, I gotta get an onion to make this dish tonight. I gotta go to the post office. When I started selling those coloring books, especially, like, you know, what did it matter if someone ordered a coloring book on Monday? I could put it in the mail Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday when a bunch of other people. But no, I was like, gotta go into town. And it took a while to really even exhale, even being up here in Idaho. Like, it wasn't an instant transformation. But now I'm like, there are many days I don't go anywhere. I got home yesterday from Yellow Pine, and I'm not going to go into town today. I'm going to go to the farm tomorrow to work with Patsy and Dan. And then Wednesday I'm going to go to Boise and come back, and then hopefully not go anywhere for a few more days. But like, just spending a whole 24, 48, 36, 72 hours, whatever it is up here, just kind of hanging and doing nothing is like, it's a great feeling. And I realize I don't always, I don't want to say you, because I don't know what you want, but I don't always need to fill my days with things the way I used to. And I've just found that just kind of hanging and improving my day in my own way by breathing, by looking out at nature, to me that's important, and kind of leads to, I guess, what will be the final point. We're up to like 75 minutes, but I say I don't give a fuck because I don't have kids, and that's kind of true. But that's the nihilistic me kind of talking. Like, I've long though said, and I still believe it to be true, that the best thing you can do for the environment is not have kids. Because if we don't have kids, then we're not going to keep producing the people that will then keep consuming things. Or if you're going to have kids, have one, man. Like, take two people, turn it into one. These people that have, like, 5 kids, and then their 5 kids have 5 kids, and then each of them, like, that's why population's so out of fucking control, man. It's just crazy. It's just crazy when you look back and, like, think of how rapidly everything's expanding. And, like, like, my 2 parents made 3 kids. Thankfully, our 3 kids only made 2. So nature is healing, and it's kind of going back to where it was. But my dad's brother had 3 kids. I don't know how many kids they've made because I don't talk to them. Hopefully none. But, these families that, like, they have their family reunions, and you see, like, then there's nothing worse for the environment than reading an obituary of a guy who was born in 1932. And it's like, he is survived by his 5 children, his 23 grandchildren, and his, 41 great-grandchildren. And it's like, would you people stop making people? What the fuck, man? That's crazy. But I say I don't care, but I do care. I care about that. Like, this planet's fucking gorgeous, man. And one of the things that struck me when I was sitting there this weekend, I was looking out at the stars, I was looking at the river, I was watching chipmunks play. At one point, a chipmunk stole my scone. Shanti had baked some beautiful scones that were blueberry and wild strawberry. And I woke up on Saturday morning, and I ate a scone, and I had another in a plastic bag, and I was drinking a coffee, and I went down to the river to rinse my coffee cup out, and I looked up, and a chipmunk was running away with my scone in its plastic bag, which had been Ziploc, so I'm sure it had to chew through the plastic. And I'm like, I don't know where that plastic ended up. I tried to chase it, but it was long gone. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry for littering that piece of plastic. But when I was staring out at the river and at the stars and at the trees and at the sky, and I was just like, nature is so fucking bitchin', man. And the thing is, I don't think the planet's going anywhere, right? And I don't think this is a new observation. George Carlin made it. Plenty of people have made it. That, like, the planet's not going anywhere. Like, the planet's going to heat up to the point that it makes human life uninhabitable. It's going to make it uninhabitable for us humans. You get fucking jerks like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos trying to go to outer space, which is a whole nother thing, man. They're not going to outer space. None of these space flights, these Tesla rockets and fucking where Jeff Bezos is flying to, they're not going to outer space. That's the weirdest thing, is these guys keep calling their company that it has to do with outer space. To me, outer space is where the moon is, man. Past the moon. You go walk on the moon, you tell me you've been in space. You take a rocket up to 100,000 feet, three times the height of a plane flies, you didn't really go to outer space, man. You just flew extra high. You're not going to outer space, okay? You're not in Star Wars. Stop saying you're going to outer space. You're just flying a plane or a rocket ship higher than other people have been flying it. You fucking Richard Branson too, okay? But the idea of, like, so, like, I'm not worried about the planet. I'm worried about humanity. Because humanity, we're all going to be fucked. And soon. And honestly, there's 2 things that I was super worried about, and that made me the most despondent when I was getting ready to commit suicide, when I thought it was a sure thing. And the 2 things that made me the most despondent was I realized how much I was going to miss nature and the fantastic sort of reality of nature. I don't even have the words to describe it, but, like, when you just go out into nature and you see the way a river has eroded a valley and made which is not caverns, but canyons. When rivers create canyons by flowing for billions of years, and you're like, this is fucking bitchin'. And I very much remember my last night when I was in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, before I went to Spokane and flew to Vegas with the intention of killing myself. That night, I didn't know it was my last night, but I knew I was getting close. I knew I couldn't keep it up much longer. And there was a beautiful sunset in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And I was looking at that sunset, and I was riding my motorcycle, trying to find a place to stay for the night. And tears started streaming down my face, because I was like, I'm going to miss sunsets. I'm going to miss sunsets. I'm going to miss being able to see them. I'm going to miss the way they change the color of the sky because of reasons that I don't even know, because I didn't pay enough attention in science class. And even if I had, this still probably wouldn't make sense to me. But the way the sunlight catches gases in the atmosphere and turns them purple and red and orange, and you see these fucking sunsets, and the way you come over a hill and can see a whole valley and jagged mountains and different types of trees and all that, like, the way the earth has ended up after all these years, like, how lucky are we to be able to experience it, and just see, like, what the fuck, man, like, these trees have been growing for tens of years, hundreds of years, but whether or not this tree in front of me is 100 years old, it's the trees that grew before it that allowed it to grow, the taller trees that shaded the younger ones and allowed them to grow up. The way the rivers have been flowing through these valleys and down these mountainsides and creating these canyons is just like, it's just fucking incredible and exceptional. And that's what made me despondent, that I was going to miss out on that. And I didn't think that if I wasn't going to kill myself that I would move to the nature. None of that even crossed my mind. It wasn't like, oh, I should not kill myself because I want to experience more nature. I was just like, man, it's going to be a shame that I don't get to experience more of this because I'm definitely going to kill myself. But on the other hand, the other thing that made me despondent was that I wasn't going to get to see the day where the planet did catch on fire and it made humans extinct. And I wasn't going to get to be here for the sort of self-imposed apocalypse that we're rushing towards. And how fucking dark is that, right? But I'm still, I don't know, still a little part of me is like, kind of rooting for it. Not rooting for it, but like, I mean, it just seems inevitable. That's it. It's like, nobody, for the most part, has changed their personal behavior, much less their corporate or their governmental behavior, to a way that's going to have or has had any meaningful effect on what we're seeing in climate change right now. So it's like, a part of me is like get the popcorn, man. And I think that's a part of me that's been inside of me since I was a kid, and the part of me that's enjoyed destroying things over the years and vandalism and violence, and the part of me that was suicidal when I was 5 years old and wanting to make my parents experience my suicide. Like, I'm not proud of that side of me, but I'm aware of it, right? I'm not proud of it, but I'm not ashamed of it, and I'm not going to hide it. And it's like, yeah, a certain part of me is like, yeah, we don't need no water, let the motherfucker burn. Because we did it to ourselves. And part of me is interested in seeing that. The other part of me, though, is like living up here on the side of the fucking mountain in Idaho, and like pretty sure, like, I'm 47 years old, about to be 48, right? So if I can live 30 more years, 40 more years, like 50 fucking tops, like, I am certainly in the definition of midlife, right? Like I'm most likely past the middle of my life. So like, I'm probably going to be able to like tough it out, right? I'm smart enough. I'll figure out the means to get to a place that isn't on fire. But like, I'm living in a place that can catch on fire literally next month. We don't know, like, there were forest fires close to here. But if that happens, I'm going to figure out somewhere else to go. Certainly not Miami, where buildings are just fucking collapsing and the sea level is rising, right? So that's a whole nother thing. Like, what about the news reporting this building in Miami? They keep reporting that shit collapsed 3 days ago. And they keep reporting 9 people dead, 150 still missing and unaccounted for. Because even the news, which likes to report on tragedy and destruction and disaster and bad times, like, they can't even bring themselves to fucking say that this building collapsing, which is also just a sign of our infrastructure in general, right? They can't bring themselves to fucking report that 159 people died in this building's collapse. And like, one of the buildings in that complex has just put a 1-bedroom apartment up for sale for $1.3 million. Like, some realtor actually put that on sale, and it was making the rounds on the internet yesterday, and I found that like it's so odd and so fucked up that you would list a unit for sale in that building, but it's also the American way, right? It's like, I gotta get mine, fuck you. And that goes back to that quote about the default assumption that if someone has the income to consume as much resources and energy as they want, they have the right to do so. If we want to survive the 21st century, we need to reject this logic. Why are people cheering Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos supposedly flying into outer space? Like I said, they're not going to outer space. And how much resources and energy are they using to build these rockets, which aren't doing anything? The idea of us colonizing Mars and building a hotel on the moon, like, not going to happen. Not going to happen in any any measurable way. There's been some reports that there might be a hotel at the space station in 2026, but how many rooms is it going to have? Wait, even if it had 1,000 rooms, no way. It's going to have like 100 rooms, tops. What if it had 1,000 rooms? Like, how many people is that? Like, how many fucking people became billionaires during the pandemic? Are they going to get those rooms? And if so, what kind of life are you going to lead in outer space? How much food are you going to bring up there? Like, you're not going to fucking grow, you're not going to grow fucking Navy beans like Henry David Thoreau is doing on the moon. It's just nuts. And people are cheering all the resources that Elon and Bezos and fucking Richard Branson are using to do their flights to outer space, which aren't even to outer space. So people are cheering all this shit. People are cheering Bitcoin. It's the future, and the energy it takes to mine Bitcoin is just fucking insane. It's, and it's like, is the idea that, like, if you can afford it, go ahead, do it? Is that where we're at? Like, and that's why I am cheering for it. Like, the part of me that's cheering for the destruction of mankind is the part of me that's looking at people thinking that this is all okay and cheering on capitalism and quote-unquote progress and moving forward. It's like, can we all just breathe? Can we all just affect our day in a positive way, by breathing and doing something for ourselves, doing something that doesn't take energy? Can we just go for a fucking walk? I hope you've been going for a walk while you've been listening to this podcast. I'm going to go for a walk now. In the meantime, I'm going to skip sponsorship shit for this week, because don't spend any money this week. Don't spend any money, because everything you buy required somebody else's energy to create, to smoke, to ship, to spin the cotton and the t-shirts that I'm trying to sell you, to fucking cut down the trees and the coloring books I'm trying to sell you. Don't buy anything. See how long you can go without spending a nickel. I'm going to try that. I'm going to try that this week. I'm supposed to do laundry tonight. I'm going to see. I'm going to give a lot of thought to that, whether or not my clothes need to be clean, how long I can go without cleaning them. And it's kind of impossible to not spend any money. But, like, see how little you can spend. Let's put it that way. Let's see how little we can all spend for the next week. For the next week, for the next month, for the next year, for the next lifetime. And I think that's what Thoreau was doing out there. He had so many calculations in his book about how much money he spent to build his house and to seed his garden. And then how much money he saved because he had kept a journal of how much money he spent on food previously. And it's incredible how little you need to live if you realize how little you need to live, Like, how little money you need to live and get by in this society. But when we're programmed to work, to buy things, to make our lives easier or happier, and, I thought I was done, but it gets back to, sometimes I read things in books and I don't understand, like, common phrases and turns of phrase all had an origin somewhere. And oftentimes we know those origins, oftentimes we don't. When I started reading Tom Sawyer, there was a line in it where Tom got in a fight. It was the first chapter. There were two boys fist fighting. I can't remember if Tom was one of them. But the two boys got in a fight, and one got up to run away from the fight. And there was a line that he ran like an antelope. And it made me think of, there's a Fish song called Run Like an Antelope. And I was like, I wonder if that's where they got the line. I would assume Trey wrote that song. He seems to be the one who writes the songs for Fish. All very smart boys. Trey especially smart, went to Princeton Day School, then obviously up to the University of Vermont. And I was like, I bet he took that line from Mark Twain, from Tom Sawyer. And then later in the book, there was a line that when Tom wanted to run away, and he was in a fight with Becky Thatcher. They were mad at each other, and he walked out of the schoolhouse and ran over the hills and far away. And I was like, is that where Jimmy Page got the title? Is over the hills and far away? Maybe that was a common turn of phrase back then. But maybe that's where it originated. But in the first chapter of Walden, for one of the first few pages, Thoreau says, the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. And I've heard that a bunch of times, and I didn't know it was from Walden. And of course, as soon as I read it, I was like, that's where it comes from, right? And, I actually looked up the meaning of that before the podcast started, because I didn't really catch it in the context from what I was reading. I could probably open it up and figure that out. Let's see. I'm not going to, because I'm trying to keep this flow. There it is, though. The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. What is called resignation is confirmed desperation. From the desperate city you go into, the desperate country, and have to console yourself with the bravery of minks and muskrats. A stereotypical but unconscious despair is concealed even under what are called the games and amusements of mankind. There is no play in them, for this comes after work, but it is a characteristic of wisdom not to do desperate things. But nowadays we live in a quiet desperation of capitalism and of wanting. We're being told to fit our wants and not our needs. Not told directly, but through the entire way the system's set up, through advertisement, through marketing, through social media. Everything's set up now for us to earn money to then pass along to a corporation, right? And that's why I'm not going to try to sell anything this week. And I'm going to keep thinking about the difference between wants and needs, because you don't need that much, and the less you need to make yourself happy, the less you need to earn, right? And the less you need to earn, the less work you're going to put in that ultimately is going to enrich someone else. Even the work I do, I'm enriching. We make the economy go around, right? But by booking shows on boats, I'm enriching the oil companies. I'm enriching the steel companies that make the boats. I'm enriching the people who own the boats. I'm enriching the beer companies whose beer we sell, right? I'm enriching the artists. Obviously, that's my favorite part of it. But the less of that I do, the wheels of the economy don't need to go round and round, they're spinning too fast, man. And the friction of their spinning is causing the planet to heat up, and climate change, and the fires that are coming for us, and the rising sea levels, and and that's a fucked up thing to leave for our children. Whether they're mine or yours, they're all ours, right? Humanity is our kids. So yeah, let's try not to buy anything this week. Let's try not to buy anything for as long as we can. Yeah, just try to be, let's just hang out, man. Let's just hang out. All right. God bless you all. Do something nice for yourself today. More importantly, do something nice for somebody else. I'm going to do my best to do that every day this week and moving forward. Keep your feet on the ground. Keep reaching for the stars, because space may be the only place left to breathe sooner than we think.